אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. Hey brother, do you still believe in one another? Hey sister, know the water's sweet but blood is thicker.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back to Bridging the Gap. I am your host, Shani Kramer. And as a reminder, aside from my life job as a mom and a wife and a community member, I also am very blessed to work as program director for our local Jewish Federation. As one of our new programs at the Federation, we are bringing you this series where I am hosting two community members to talk a little bit about themselves and the relationship that they have with each other. There's a Jewish saying, Achenu kol beis Yisrael, we are all brothers and sisters. We are living in an environment today that is filled with mistrust and misunderstanding, and we would love to point out the positive relationships that we already have here in South Bend. Today, I have with me two wonderful members of our community, Levin and Laurie Baron, and I want to thank both of you I'm going to start off with Lisa. Lisa, I know that your parents were here in South Bend. I'm not sure for how long, but you definitely have some roots here, and I would love if you could give us a little bit of a glimpse into your upbringing here in South Bend.
Oh, sure. Yeah, my parents, Michael and Bobby Levin, have been here my entire life. Bobby, my mom, she grew up here. She was born in Iowa City, Iowa, but I don't know, it wasn't long before they came here. And so I know that she really wanted to marry somebody from the coast and move there. And she married someone from the coast. My dad was born in Portland, Oregon, and they decided to come here temporarily and have never left.
Yeah, nobody comes here temporarily. Notice that.
Right. So I grew up in South Bend. I actually attended the Hebrew Day School. My sister was one of the first class that was there. I have very fond memories of the Hebrew Day School, although it was quite different back then than it is now. Actually, growing up in South Bend, so it didn't matter what shul you went to. All the children, most of the Jewish children went to the Hebrew Day School, and we had a bus that would drive around the entire city and pick us up. And we all knew each other, and all our parents knew each other, and everybody felt like a big family. And I still, the people that remain in South Bend of my generation, we still know each other. And the unfortunate thing is that our children don't. Mm-hmm. And I feel very sad about that. But Shani, I don't know, were you in South Bend when I was doing my Bridging the Gap?
I guess not. I didn't know you did something like that. So tell me a little bit about that, Lisa.
Right. So I left for about 20 years and literally traveled the world. And then when I came back because my husband and I had a daughter, and we wanted to live closer to my parents. And I knew the Hebrew Day School was here. And I knew that my daughter, expecting that it was still the same school, I knew my daughter would get an excellent secular and Jewish education. And unfortunately, not coming from an Orthodox background, I don't have the ability to supplement any of the Jewish background if we were to have our children in the public school system. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty excited, but I was disappointed. It's still a good school. I'm not saying it's not, but I was disappointed that it had changed so drastically from what I remember.
Right.
And one of the major things that upset me was that the entire Jewish community was not utilizing the day school anymore. And so I did try. I started something called Bridging the Gap.
I had no idea I was plagiarizing you.
I wondered. I
apologize for that. I thought it was my wonderful idea.
Oh, it's totally your wonderful idea. You didn't know. I felt.
Yeah.
I was sad. I was sad for our Jewish community.
Yeah.
Because so many children were missing out on an opportunity.
I hope you still think it's something that's possible.
I would.
I don't think giving up is in Lisa's vocabulary.
No,
by the way.
probably not. Right, Lisa?
I know. I need you guys on my side. I need you to help me.
We all need to be on each other's sides. That's the truth.
Exactly.
We're all sisters.
Yeah.
And in that, Laurie, I'd love to move over to you. You are a more recent transport to South Bend. I think you guys came around the same time we moved. And you come from the sunny state of California. I'd love to hear a little bit about your upbringing in California and what brought you to South Bend.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Shani, for having us both. This is really exciting. I have to admit first that I had heard of Lisa's Bridging the Gap program. And when you came up with your title, I thought you would talk to her. I thought it was based on that idea of like chapter 2. And I think it's so funny to see that it wasn't. And it's really
it's the great minds.
Meant to be, Lisa. Or we could just
meant
say
to be. Soul sisters.
Two great minds think alike, right?
Exactly. Right? So yes, I grew up in the city of Berkeley, California, which, I actually think, Lisa, if we hadn't met in South Bend, Hashem would have made it that we would have met in California at some point too, because we both lived there at different points in our lives.
That is true. Yes.
Our paths have crossed many times. We just didn't know it until recently.
Give me the chills.
Yeah, exactly. So I grew up in Berkeley, but I didn't really know what it meant to be Jewish. As a kid, we did a little bit of Passover, a little bit of Hanukkah. And my parents actually like to share the story of when I was probably about 5 years old, maybe our daughter's age. They were singing the Hanukkah song, singing the blessing over the candles. And at the end of the song, I got the candles like a birthday cake. I didn't know. I didn't understand what was going on. I had no Jewish education, and I was doing the best that I could with what we knew at the time. And so I grew up with that for a while. And when I was in college, I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz. And we were filling out a form. Lisa, I think you'd appreciate this. I don't remember if we've talked about this before. A form of all of my identities. Who am I? What does it mean? I'm a woman. What age am I? What demographic? All the different labels, socioeconomic status. My race, all these kind of things. My religion. I filled out this whole form, and nowhere on this form did it mention that did I write that I was Jewish. That I knew I was Jewish. But what did it mean that I was Jewish? It wasn't my religion. I think I wrote agnostic at the time. And I was left with this question of, what is it? Is it an ethnicity? Is it only a religion? What is this? Is it something in my blood? And I carried that question with me throughout college and moved it across country to go experience the seasons in Boston. And I ended up going and getting my master's in social work. Another thing Lisa and I have in common.
Yeah.
Woo, 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 social workers. And
2 social workers online. This is a little intimidating.
Could be. Totally intimidated.
Go ahead, Laurie.
And while I was finishing my social work degree, I realized that, to be honest, I was carrying a prejudice toward religious people. I had a client at the time, actually, a very wonderful young woman, very bright, very sweet, a wonderful client to work with, really motivated to work on herself, and really a pleasure to have in therapy. But I noticed that I was judging her a little bit, that I had this really? She believes in God? Come on, really? That kind of voice going on. And I was talking with my supervisor about it one day, acknowledging that I had this prejudice. And I said, look, I grew up in Berkeley, California. If there's anything my Berkeley education gave me, it's the knowledge that prejudice comes from ignorance. So clearly I'm ignorant about religion, and I need to learn more, because she's a wonderful person. There's no reason for me to be judging her. Wow. And I need to understand more about what this means to her.
Wow. That's so,
world.
that's
and so I started learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time. And I ended up deciding at that point, I don't remember, somewhere in my 20s, and I decided to go on birthright. And I figured, if I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a Jew, what better place to go than to the land of Israel? And so I was accepted on a trip to go to Israel. And through a bunch of different divine providence, I ended up on a trip with a bunch of UCLA college students. I was post-grad school at this point. So I stood out like a sore thumb. I was definitely not like part of this. It was a funny mix that was meant to be. And it was actually a trip really designed to help Jews understand about Judaism and learn and understand and reconnect. And it was during that trip that I basically, realized that there might actually be a God, and this God might actually care about how I live my life. And whoa, what do I do with that?
Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
It was heavy stuff. It was an intense trip. I was like my spiritual life crisis, as I used to call it.
Wow.
It really was. It was
wow.
Yeah, I think I was 25 at the time, something like that. And so I ran back to California and I actually Googled Berkeley Jewish, and I just started interviewing people. I interviewed a conservative rabbi, a modern Orthodox rabbi, a spiritual cantor renewal. I'm not sure how she identifies what her title is. A very interesting person, and a few other people in the Jewish community there. And I would just ask them, what do you believe and why do you live the way that you do? And it was really an interesting time. I learned a lot, met some really wonderful people doing really beautiful things in the world.
I would have loved to read those interviews, Laurie.
I wish I had written them down and recorded them. Right now, I have my journals that I do have.
That would have been a great book.
It would have been.
Wow.
And it was really special. What I came out of at the time was realizing, I'm not sure at that point, I'm not sure how I want to live my life, but I know that the people I want to learn from were the ones who were saying, this is what we believe in, and this is what we strive to live up to, even when it's difficult. Mm-hmm. And the ones who were saying that were the Orthodox. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, while I was back in California, I was doing this mindfulness, it was actually through a hospital. It was a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I was actually doing it with my mother. And the last day of this training was a full silent mindfulness retreat. And I remember at the same, I was obviously on one part of my life, I was exploring my Jewish identity and what did it mean to be Jewish. And on the other side, I was continuing my social work and practicing and doing job interviews and doing this mindfulness program. And it was during lunch of the retreat. And again, the whole day is silent. Wow. And we're sitting there and I'm eating my lunch and mindfully, of course, chewing every little bite and having, enjoying my my experience.
Lisa, I don't think this retreat is for either of us.
No, most definitely not.
It wouldn't last for a minute.
You'd be surprised. You've been building up for 10 weeks, so at least it's, you've got some practice, but yeah, it's definitely an experience.
I should probably do it.
Yeah, exactly. That probably means you need it, right?
Me too, Lisa.
Danny and I, arm in arm, silent.
We'd all benefit from it. It's powerful. I would do it again. Although it would look a little different this time, I think, because of what I'm about to say. I was wondering to myself, like, this is wonderful, and I've gained so much from this program, and I'm really learning to just be present and mindful of the world around me and the world within me, and it's so amazing. But how do I live like this? It's one thing to go on a retreat. It's one thing to take a class and you have a teacher who's guiding you through it the whole time and keeping you on track and keeping you focused. And to be on a retreat where everybody's doing it, fine. But tomorrow, what am I going to do with this? How do I live this in my day-to-day busy life? And it was in that moment, I remember sitting there eating lunch. And I wish I remembered what food it was. Let's say it was an apple. I'm not sure that it was, but it would be good. I was about to take a bite of this apple.
That sounds very wholesome. So yes.
Right, exactly. It was something
very
healthy. Right. I didn't think of that. That's true, right? A little biblical reference. And I realized, oh, that's what the Torah is meant to be for us. It's meant to be, in some way, it's a guide. It's a blueprint for how to live our life mindfully, but not just mindfulness of what it means in psychology today, because that's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's how do we live fully mindful of our relationship with our Creator in the world, in our day-to-day life, like in the busyness, in the stuff, in motherhood and all of these things that we're doing and busy and working and whatnot.
Right.
But that's really the idea is that's why, halacha can be so detailed about all these little things. And that's why we make a blessing before we eat. And that's why we do all of these things, is to take us out of the moment, reconnect us into that mindful place, that conscious place, and then go back into the activity that we're about to do.
Wow.
And it was in that moment where I realized, oh, wow.
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to do this.
Mm.
A few weeks, couple months later, something like after Sukkot, after Sukkot that year. So in November, I headed back and I went to Israel and I decided to go study. And I showed up in my jeans and my t-shirt and I said, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but let's see what happens. And yeah, thank God.
Wow, what an incredible story, Laurie. And it doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me at all, because I find you to be a very authentic person, so that you had such like an authentic journey, I feel like is very fitting for you. And I'd love if, Laurie, if you could tell us how did you get here to South Bend? How did that
Right.
journey happen?
Right, so that part's a little shorter. Well, the short version, basically, meanwhile, while I was in Israel, I ended up working for Rabbi Danielle Katz of the Elevation Project, and we ran elevation seminars. It's like a meditation, prayer, consciousness through a Torah perspective workshop. My husband attended one, and that's how we met. A whole other story for another time. But my husband is from Chicago. He's actually from Wilmette, and a northern suburb of Chicago. And he also grew up definitely Jewish, a very strong Jewish identity, but he wasn't Torah observant growing up. And he'd also gone to Israel and become more observant. And so we met and we went back to Chicago and got married, and then moved back to Israel for almost a year, and then came back to Chicago. And I was working full time as a social worker. And during that year, we were expecting our first child, our daughter. And when she was born, of course, before you actually become a mother, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do everything and it's all going to be fine. And then I had a baby. And I was like, wait, I don't want to go back to working full time. I don't want to, that's too much for me. And we had a couple weeks to figure it out when our lease was going to need to be renewed. And so we had been to South Bend. My husband is cousins with Reza Lerman. And he had reached out to him when he went to Israel. He had come back to visit, and she had heard through a second cousin or something that he was becoming more observant. And she reached out and called him and said, hey, I'm your cousin, just so you know, like, I've been through this, and if you need anything, I'm here for you. And he had actually been to South Bend and spent, I think, Passover. He had spent some holiday with them at some point. So they hosted us for Sheva Brachas for one of the meals after we got married. So we'd been here before and we liked it. It was a nice place to get away after a wedding and have some quiet and nature and space and
You
coming out of
never
the
probably
city.
thought you'd end up here.
Never, not at all. No way.
You're a city person. No.
I grew up in Berkeley. I lived in Boston. I'd always lived near, a coast, or at least, in Chicago. Like, you can call it a lake, a coast, whatever. Never thought I would be living in Indiana. That's for sure.
I think
but here we are.
Most people don't think that, and you know what a wonderful place to end up. I think
we love it. We really
it's
do.
such a wonderful mix. That's why we're so blessed, because we have all these people who thought they would never end up here and are coming from different backgrounds. I think that's what makes this city so unique. I love the differences between all of us. I feel like that's so special. And like, if we could just, learn from each other and, try to unite in that way, then I think it could it's really beneficial for us living here out of town. But what a beautiful journey, Laurie. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd love to discuss with you two ladies of maybe you could tell us how the two of you met. I don't know if you remember how the two of you met, but if you could, is there a story behind it? Or was it just, bumping into each other, hello, and then you developed a relationship after that? Because I know you guys do have a relationship.
Well, definitely do. I love Laurie. I think Laurie
love you too.
is way older than her actual years.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and she's extraordinarily uplifting and
spiritual.
Close your ears, Laurie. You're not going to want to hear this.
Let's mute Laurie for a minute.
Right. Uplifting and motivating. Of course, she's very spiritual and she is extremely authentic, and she's such a loving soul and patient, at least out in public. I don't know
She
about at
is.
home, but she's
I'm
certainly,
sure she is. Absolutely.
she actually, I kind of look up to her. As she said, we're both social workers, and so we can connect on that level, which I love. My memory goes back all of 2 hours. That's about it. Anything that happened more than 2 hours ago, good luck.
I hear you. I don't blame you at all. Yeah, I know. That must be tricky. So you don't really remember then, Lisa, the first time. Was it maybe at the tourist center that you guys?
I think probably was the tourist center, because I remember her working for the tourist center, and I know that I was very happy about the tourist center when we came back to live here, and I was excited about the tourist center, and so we did attend. We moved specifically into this area for that reason.
Wow.
So that we would stay connected to Judaism, because I really believe if I'd be outside of this area, life happens, things happen, and you just sort of go with the flow. And so, but Laurie, I don't remember exactly. I think it might be at the tourist center that we met, but I was immediately impressed with her and wanted so desperately to be her friend.
Oh, I totally get that.
By
the way, Laurie, I feel exactly the same. I also look up to you. I don't even know, I'll be honest, we're ladies, so we don't talk about our age, right? We're ageless. But
That's right.
I don't really know how old any of us are. I don't know, but I always felt, at least, that Laurie was my superior in knowledge and and I grew up, I come from a religious background. There's something when you meet somebody like that, it's somewhere like, I want to look up to this person. There's something there,
Yeah.
Aww.
Laurie, do you remember at all the first time that you met Lisa?
So I was trying, and Lisa and I were talking about this the other day, because I was like, oh, we should know our story.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been through the tourist center. I remember some of the earlier times that we spent time together. I know, actually, I don't know if you remember this, Lisa, we actually had organized a racism workshop when I was working at the tourist center.
Yes.
It was meant to be an ongoing thing. I think it might have been when I was expecting our second child, and maybe it only had one time. I don't remember exactly what happened.
Yeah, that actually that does ring a bell. Did we do one?
We did. We did do one. We watched a short class from the Meaningful Life Center, and we had a discussion after. And it was interesting, because we really did have an eclectic turnout. It was not huge, but it was good for South Bend. There were probably maybe 8 or 9 women from different parts of the community, and some women who I've never met before.
Mm-hmm.
Good,
and we did talk about women of color, in the Jewish community, and the need to address that. And I feel bad that we didn't really follow forward at the time. I'm pretty sure it was right before our son was born. I think timing wise.
Well, we can do it again, Laurie. Let's get on.
Always do it again. In fact, that's Laurie, you just segued us onto the next point of the conversation I was going to bring up. We were talking how wonderful Laurie is. I'd like to talk about how wonderful Lisa is.
Yes. Absolutely.
Lisa, let's do it, right, Lisa?
Let's do it.
You don't even have to mute yourself, Lisa. You can listen in. So I was very impressed. I met Lisa when she came back from her stint in Japan, Okinawa, right? Was that what it was?
Right. Yep.
And I know that was a very emotional time for you, Lisa. And I loved and I love your passion. I mean, it just comes off of you in waves. And I guess, I have some of that too. So I'm naturally attracted to people who have it. And I love when I met you. I loved your bouncy personality. I loved everything about it. And I have been so impressed by you, Lisa, because we're talking about authenticity. I find you super authentic. When we had the incident, the racial incident a couple of months ago, and this is not the first time that obviously this has come up. It's been, racial injustice has been around for forever, right?
Yeah.
And it's something I know Lisa has been passionate about for a really long time. And she restarted, I believe it's called, right, Black Lives Matter 2. Is that
Yeah.
TOO, right? Or is it
Well,
right?
it's TOO/T. Well, it's TWO/TOO. Yeah.
There you go. I want to make sure I name it properly.
Yeah.
And she has been going to the park, right, every
Yeah.
Sunday with her children, to bring awareness to her. And I'm going to let her say it in her own words. But I basically have been following her journey on Facebook, and most people, I would say, have, this incident happened, and with George Floyd's death, and it passed, and most people have already, gone back to the craziness that COVID is, and just living their lives. But Lisa made a commitment that she was going to do something, and she was going to bring awareness, and she has never backed down from it. And I've been watching on Facebook how she goes out every single week, and she is making a big difference. People can tell when somebody's authentic. People can tell when somebody genuinely cares. I have just been so blown away by her dedication. I'd love, Lisa, if you could talk a little bit about what you've been doing, and also, what do you think, as Jews, what could we be doing better? You shouldn't be the only one who's out there doing this. How can we join in? How can we make a difference? I think as Jews, we need to be a shining example for the world. So that means we can't accept injustice in any form either. So I'd love to hear from you what you think.
Well, first of all, thank you for all of that. I'm extremely uncomfortable.
Oh. I made the social worker uncomfortable. I must be good at my job.
Well done.
And I do want to say, Shani, that you do have that same type of passion, and I love it. Absolutely love it. If I could tie you to my hip, you and I would go out, and
There
we
you
would
go.
A good image. Thank you.
the world. And then Lori too. Lori would be on my other hip. I've got two
Oh, there we
hips.
go.
Yes, Lori would have to calm us down. We were too friendly.
Right,
We don't think
would.
enough.
Yeah, she'd be our Valium.
There you go. It's a great plan.
There we go.
It is. We'll save the world.
Yeah.
So okay, where did you want me to start? Because I could start anywhere.
Yeah. First of all, Lisa, where did you get this passion for, where does it come? I'm not talking about your passion in general, but this specific project about racial injustice. I've seen people be passionate about it, but not to your level. I'm wondering, where did that awareness come from, that sensitivity?
I actually believe I got it from my mother. While she's not quite she's definitely not outspoken as I am, but I remember growing up always somehow, and I know this came from my mom, somehow knowing that I was no better than anybody else. And somehow, again, my memory only goes back 2 hours. I was, my mom impressed upon me that everybody is equal. And I would, I remember my mom going door to door with a not a survey, where everybody signs a petition. A petition. And it didn't have to do with race. It had to do with something else. But my mom showed me that when there's something that you want, you have to work for it. You have to do something. You can't just sit back and watch. And I think the combination of those two messages also, and then the third thing is the Holocaust. I, of course, grew up learning about it all the time, learning about how neighbors that had known and loved Jewish people would turn on them, would not stand up for them, would just sometimes just blink as they're being taken away and their houses are being destroyed and people are moving into their houses and taking their stuff. And it was okay that people just stood back and watched as this happened. And I know all these stories so well, that we would have loved if the rest of Germany and Austria and all these places would have stood up and said, this is not okay. This is not okay. You cannot treat people this way, because we did not have the power to do so. And with that, I cannot fathom how, and I know people, I have lost friends because of this. People they do not like it when I talk about it. They don't like it when I bring up the Holocaust, but the Holocaust is a teaching. It is to be used for learning. If, we can't let anything happen like that again. And we can't let anything happen to us like that again, but we most definitely cannot sit by when we know that it is, and maybe it might be in a different fashion. It's not, the same, but that is happening, that people like you and me and our neighbors, and we do have neighbors. I went to a public school. I have, so many friends of so many different backgrounds. How can I look them in the eyes and say that I support them when I remain quiet? I just cannot do it. I can't fathom doing that to people that I love, and people that really just, I don't even know, but I know that they're people. I don't see this as a black issue or a black and white issue. I see this as a humanity issue. And I am uncomfortable sometimes when I do this. A lot of times I was feeling alone in doing it, but that's okay. I mean, you do what you got to do. You hope that people will see it and join in. You hope that people will have the same passion, will maybe even hear you and say, wow, okay, yeah, I get that. I see that. I want to do that. And sometimes it does happen. I have to say, and I am proud to say that when somebody comes to join me, more often than not, they are Jewish. And from an observant background, from a less observant background, it does not matter. I cannot say how much love I feel when people get out of their comfort zone and do something, and Shani, you asked how can you get involved? How can anybody get involved? What do I think Jewish people should be doing? I think Jewish people should be making our voice heard. Mm-hmm. I think that we point to the 60s and we say, oh, the Jews were on the front lines. The Jews were, that was in the 60s. We are now in the 21st century. We need to stop talking about the 60s, and we need to be on the front lines again. So really, you could do anything. Anybody could do anything, but I would love it if people joined me.
Wow. Well, it's so beautiful, Lisa. And it's such an amazing service that you're doing, really, for the community. And I think what's interesting about it, absolutely, I think that we need to come together against injustice, but what we need to do is also unite in order to do that, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we have to bridge the gap. We need to join our community together in order to take care of the important things. And
absolutely.
And I look forward to that happening here in South Bend. And Laurie, I'd love to ask you, is there anything that you feel that we could do as a community, I guess, better to create the sense of unity?
Yeah, that is a great question, Shani. I wish I had the perfect answer to it. I think, from my experience.
You're supposed to have it.
Yeah, Laurie, don't let us down here.
Let's see what words I'm given. Yeah. I think from my experience, the more, what I said in my story, that any kind of prejudice or any barrier that we're carrying between each other, it comes from ignorance. And I think so the more that we can learn about each other through genuine interaction, which is hard these days with COVID and everything that we're facing as a world. But using the mediums that we can, safely, coming together, across the spectrum of Jewish identity and getting to know each other and understanding where each other are coming from with love and respect and growing together. I think one of the wonderful things that Lisa and I have shared together is, we used to learn weekly together. Hopefully we'll get back into that again when school starts.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And we had a weekly women's group that was like a self-development group with a really eclectic crowd, and really with a common goal of just becoming better people and working on ourselves and using different tools, from a Jewish perspective that allow us to do that. And I think it really helped each of us get to know each other and see beyond labels and, just being able to share that together is huge. And the more we can do of that, which I think, Shani, you're doing so much of that in your position. And I really appreciate that. And I love your passion. And I want to both echo everything you both said about each other. I really feel the same way.
Thank you. Well, I agree, Laurie. I think that that's really what it's at. It's let's cross over our comfort zones, right? Let's forget everything that we thought we knew about each other, and because it's really just perspective. And let's really get to know each other. And I think that's what we're going to do here. So I want to thank you both again for joining me on this episode of Bridging the Gap, and looking forward to more conversation and more productive conversation. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much, Shani.
Sean.